The jade bracelet was heavy dark green and worth more than my first house. When my husband Richard clasped it around my wrist, he told me I looked like royalty. He insisted I wear it to the upcoming spring gala and made me promise never to take it off. I thought it was an apology for years of a cold marriage. I was wrong. It wasn't a gift. It was a death sentence. That night, while Richard slept soundly beside me, my phone lit up with a message from an unknown number. The bracelet is a marker. Throw it away now or you'll pay. I didn't call the police. You see, Richard made a critical error. He forgot he married a forensic accountant. I didn't panic, I investigated. What I found wasn't just infidelity. It was a setup designed to send me to prison for the rest of my life while he ran off with his mistress. But he underestimated me. I didn't throw the bracelet away. Instead, I did something much more dangerous. I used his own greed to sign his life away. If you think you know how revenge stories end, think again. This isn't about screaming matches or violence. It's about how I turned his $100,000 trap into his own personal prison cell without ever raising my voice. Watch until the very last second to see the precise moment the handcuffs clicked, not on me, but on the true mastermind. My name is Kristen Vance, and at 54 years old, I have spent the last 30 years as a senior forensic accountant, deciphering the secrets men hide in their financial statements. I have built a career and a reputation on precision discipline and the quiet, unwavering understanding that while people may lie, numbers always tell the truth. Life with Richard had become like a perfectly balanced spreadsheet, stable, predictable, and entirely devoid of passion. We didn't fight. We simply coexisted in a sprawling, pristine home that felt more like an art gallery than a sanctuary. Richard was a man of image, a high-level consultant who sold confidence to nervous investors, and our marriage was a critical part of that package. We were the golden couple of our country club set, always smiling, always appropriate, and always distant. But recently the air in the house had shifted, becoming thick with an unspoken tension. He wasn't just preparing for a party. He was acting like a man preparing for an interrogation. He poured wine with a shaking hand, his eyes darting to his phone every few minutes, a crack in the facade that only someone trained to look for fractures would notice. He sat me down for a private dinner that evening, a rarity in our chaotic schedules. The table was set with the good china candles flickering against the mahogany, but the romantic atmosphere felt staged like a set piece for a play I hadn't rehearsed. When he slid the velvet box across the table, his smile didn't reach his eyes. "For you," he said, his voice tight, lacking the warmth of affection. I opened it to reveal a jade bracelet unlike anything I had ever seen. It was a deep forest green, almost black in the low light, thick and intricately carved with ancient motifs. It was magnificent, undeniably expensive, and completely unlike me. I preferred simple gold, understated elegance. This was a statement piece, a shout in a room of whispers. "It's an heirloom," Richard lied, smoothly moving to take my wrist before I could even object or ask where it came from. "My partners need to see you wearing this at the gala, Kristen. It proves our family's stability. It shows we hold on to our legacy." The metal clasp clicked shut with a sound that echoed like a prison door locking. The weight of it was shocking. It dragged my arm down cold against my pulse, sitting heavy on the bone. "It's heavy," I murmured, trying to instinctively pull my hand back, but his grip tightened, just for a fraction of a second before relaxing into a caress that felt more like a restraint. "Leave it on," he commanded, masking the order as a lover's suggestion. "Don't take it off until the gala is over. It's bad luck to remove it once it's been placed." Bad luck? Richard didn't believe in luck. He believed in leverage. Later that evening, I retreated to the master bath, locking the door behind me and turning on the harsh vanity lights to inspect the gift. In my line of work, I appraise assets daily. I know the difference between costume jewelry and serious capital. This wasn't just a bracelet. This was easily $100,000 wrapped around my ulna. I picked up the velvet box it came in and turned it over in my hands. It was empty. There was no certificate of authenticity, no receipt, and most alarmingly, no insurance appraisal. My forensic brain kicked into high gear, the fog of the dutiful wife dissipating. You don't buy a six-figure asset and fail to insure it unless you don't want a paper trail. You don't insist your wife wears it continuously unless you are afraid to leave it unattended in the house. Why now? Why this? Richard wasn't romantic. Every gift he had ever given me was a tax write-off or a public relations maneuver. This felt different. It felt urgent. It felt reckless. The cold stones seemed to seep into my skin, chilling my blood, as the pieces of the puzzle began to click together in my mind. I realized I wasn't being pampered. I was being utilized. In the world of money laundering, you park assets where no one looks. You hide things in plain sight. I looked at the heavy green stone on my wrist and realized he didn't put it on me to make me look beautiful. He put it on me so he wouldn't have to hold it himself. That heavy, silent weight on my wrist made sleep impossible, and while Richard snored softly beside me, the very picture of a man with a clear conscience, I lay wide awake staring at the ceiling fan slicing through the darkness. The jade bracelet felt less like jewelry and more like a cold hand gripping my forearm, a constant physical reminder that something in my life had shifted on its axis. It was just past 2 in the morning when the phone on my nightstand lit up the sudden glow, startling me in the pitch-black room. I snatched it up quickly, terrified the vibration would wake Richard, though I didn't know why I felt the need to hide a simple notification. But when I unlocked the screen, the message waiting for me froze the blood in my veins. It was from an unknown number, no name, no picture, just 3 terrifying sentences that didn't sound like a prank. The bracelet is a marker. Do not wear it to the gala. Get out now. I stared at the words, my breath hitching in my throat. A marker. That wasn't the language of a jealous mistress or a high school bully. That was the terminology of organized crime and forensic audits. In my world, a marker is an identifier, a way to tag an asset or a liability so it can be tracked and liquidated. Panic flared hot in my chest, but I forced it down, locking it away behind the same professional detachment I used when uncovering embezzlement schemes at work. I didn't wake my husband. I didn't scream. Instead, I slipped out of bed, grabbed my laptop, and retreated to the guest room down the hall. I needed answers, not comfort. I booted up the proprietary skip tracing software I used for deep dive background checks, a tool that could pierce through layers of digital anonymity. My fingers flew across the keyboard as I input the sender's number. It was a burner phone, of course, a cheap prepaid device bought with cash intended to be untraceable. But even burner phones leave digital footprints if you know where to look. Cell tower pings activation locations. The software churned for a minute before spitting out a geolocation that made me gasp aloud. The signal was originating from the Golden Oaks, the exclusive, exorbitantly expensive assisted living facility on the north side of town. There was only one person I knew at Golden Oaks, Richard's mother, Evelyn. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. Evelyn. It made no sense. For the 20 years I had been married to her son, Evelyn had been a fortress of ice, critical, distant, and perpetually disappointed in my lack of pedigree. In recent years, her sharp tongue had been dulled by what Richard called early onset dementia, rendering her confused and frail. Why would a woman who could barely remember her nurse's name be sending me cryptic warnings about criminal markers at 2 in the morning? I had to know. I waited until Richard left for his office the next morning, feigning a headache to stay home, and then drove straight to the facility with the bracelet hidden under the sleeve of a thick cashmere sweater. When I entered Evelyn's suite, she was sitting by the window staring blankly at the manicured gardens while a nurse fussed over her breakfast tray. "She's having a slow morning, Mrs. Vance," the nurse whispered sympathetically. "She keeps asking for her cat. She hasn't had a cat in 40 years. I nodded, playing along, and waited until the nurse left the room, closing the door behind her with a soft click. I walked over to the chair and stood directly in Evelyn's line of sight. "Evelyn," I said softly, "I got your text." For a moment, she didn't react, her eyes milky and vacant. Then slowly the vacancy vanished. Her spine straightened, her chin lifted, and the fog in her eyes cleared to reveal a gaze as sharp as a razor. She looked at the door to ensure we were alone, then turned that piercing look on me. "Took you long enough," she said, her voice clear, commanding, and completely devoid of confusion. "And for God's sake, pull up a chair. My neck hurts looking up at you." I was too stunned to speak. The dementia was an act, a survival tactic. I sat down, my hands trembling slightly. You're lucid." Evelyn scoffed, a dry, bitter sound. "I'm the only one in this family who sees things clearly, Kristen. Being invisible is the only safety I have left." She pointed a bony finger at my sleeve. "Show it to me." I pulled back the wool to reveal the jade bracelet. Evelyn's expression didn't soften, it hardened into something tragic. "Jade," she whispered, shaking her head. "He chose jade for you. He chose diamonds for me." She met my eyes, and the intensity of her fear was palpable. "He did this to me 10 years ago, right before the SEC audit. I barely survived it. You might not." She leaned in closer, dropping her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "Listen to me closely, because we don't have much time. The Vance men don't have partners, they have scapegoats. Whenever the business gets too hot, whenever the federal investigations start closing in, they need a place to dump the toxic assets." She explained the family tradition with chilling clarity. The bracelet wasn't a gift, it was a beacon. It was physically linked to a specific set of offshore accounts and shell companies, a paper trail that would lead investigators straight to the person wearing it. "The gala isn't a party, Kristen," she hissed. "It's a handover. A raid is coming. If you walk into that ballroom wearing that bracelet, you are walking into a federal indictment. You will be the one holding the bag for a massive money laundering scheme involving a shell company called Apex Holdings." Apex Holdings. The name sounded familiar, a ghost in the financial data I had sensed but never seen. Evelyn gripped my hand, her skin papery, but her grip iron strong. "Richard isn't protecting you. He's serving you up on a silver platter to buy himself time to run." I looked at this woman, this stranger I had called family for 2 decades, and felt the ground beneath me dissolve. For 10 years I thought Evelyn hated me. I was wrong. She wasn't ignoring me. She was waiting for the moment I would need saving. Leaving the sterile, quiet halls of the Golden Oaks, I drove back to the house that Richard and I had built together, a structure that now loomed against the skyline like a monument to a lie. Evelyn's warning rattled in my head with the persistence of a fire alarm, but as I pulled into the driveway, fear began to calcify into a cold, hard determination. I was done being the unsuspecting victim. It was time to do what I did best. I entered the house silent, pristine, and empty, and went straight to Richard's home office. He was at work, arrogant enough to believe his technologically illiterate wife would never venture beyond the household budget spreadsheets he condescendingly asked me to manage. He forgot that while he managed people, I managed secrets. I sat at his desk, the leather chair swallowing me whole, and logged into the family's shared cloud server. I had the admin passwords, not because he trusted me, but because he was too lazy to pay the bills himself. I bypassed the domestic folders and navigated straight to the hidden partitions I knew existed, but had politely ignored for years out of respect for his privacy, a courtesy he clearly had not returned. I searched for Apex Holdings. The folder appeared instantly, a digital ghost town of shell transactions and wire transfers. My forensic eye scanned the ledgers looking for the anomaly, and there it was glaring at me in black and white pixels. A purchase order dated 3 days ago. Asset acquisition, Jade Antiquity, $112,000. The source of funds wasn't Richard's personal account. It was a wire transfer from a blocked account in the Cayman Islands flagged in the system as Apex Liquid Assets. My stomach turned. The bracelet on my wrist wasn't just jewelry. It was a conversion of illegal funds into a physical asset. By wearing it, I was essentially carrying the evidence of money laundering on my body. If the FBI raided the gala as Evelyn predicted, they wouldn't just find a woman wearing expensive jewelry, they would find the beneficiary of a federal crime. I was the de facto owner of the dirty money. Legally, possession was 9/10 of the law, and Richard had shackled the felony to my wrist. But the financial betrayal was only the first layer of the rot. I needed to understand the endgame. Why sacrifice me? Why now? I closed the ledger and opened his personal email archive, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I typed in a search for travel confirmations, expecting to find a solo ticket for him to a non-extradition country. What I found instead shattered the last fragile remnants of the love I once held for him. The top thread wasn't with a lawyer or a business partner, it was with a woman named Isabella. I clicked on the thread and my breath hitched. Isabella wasn't a stranger. She was the 26-year-old daughter of his main investor, a girl I had hosted at dinner parties, a girl who had smiled at me across my own dining table. The emails were nauseatingly detailed. "Just a few more days, my love," Richard had written. "Once the HR issue is resolved at the gala, we will be free." I scrolled down, my hand trembling so violently I could barely control the mouse. And then I saw it, the attachment. 2 first-class one-way tickets to the Maldives departing at 8:00 a.m. on the morning after the gala. The timeline was brutal in its precision. The plan was crystal clear. I would be arrested at the gala Saturday night, creating a massive chaotic diversion. While I was being processed, fingerprinted, and interrogated about the Apex funds attached to my wrist, Richard would be boarding a plane with Isabella untethered and Rich leaving me to rot in a federal cell. He wasn't just panicked. He was upgrading his life. He was trading a 54-year-old accountant for a 20-something heiress, and he was using my incarceration as his exit strategy. I sat back in his chair, the silence of the room deafening. I waited for the tears to come, for the heartbreak to cripple me, but nothing happened. The sadness that had been lingering in the back of my throat evaporated, replaced instantly by a sensation I had never felt before, a cold, crystalline rage. It was the clarity of a balance sheet that finally zeroed out. He thought I was weak. He thought I was just a prop in his life, a soft place to land until he found something better. He underestimated the years I spent hunting down men exactly like him, men who thought they were smarter than the numbers. Running wasn't an option. He would hunt me down or frame me in absentia. Confronting him was suicide. He would just accelerate the plan. No, I had to beat him at his own game. I looked at the digital clock on the corner of the screen. I had exactly 24 hours until the gala. 24 hours to rewrite the narrative. I looked down at the jade bracelet, no longer seeing a shackle but a weapon. He didn't just want a divorce. He wanted to trade my life for his freedom. But he forgot one thing: he married an auditor, and I always balanced the books. The sun rose on the morning of the spring gala, with a deceptive brilliance casting long golden beams across the marble floors of our kitchen, illuminating a scene of domestic normalcy that was entirely fabricated. I had spent the night not sleeping, but rehearsing. I had practiced my smile in the bathroom mirror until it reached my eyes, practiced the precise pitch of my voice to sound enthusiastic rather than accusatory. And most importantly, I had drafted the document that would serve as the linchpin of my survival. I walked into the kitchen dressed in a soft silk robe, my hair perfectly coiffed, carrying 2 cups of espresso and the weight of my entire future in the pocket of my sash. Richard was already at the island, scrolling through his phone with that same frantic energy I had observed for weeks. He looked up as I approached, his eyes darting to my face, searching for any crack in my demeanor, any sign that I knew about Isabella, or the one-way tickets to the Maldives burning a hole in his digital outbox. I gave him nothing but the adoration of a wife who was blissfully, tragically unaware. "Morning, darling," I chimed, setting the coffee down in front of him. I made a show of admiring the jade bracelet on my wrist, letting the heavy stone clink against the granite countertop. "I have to admit, Richard, I haven't taken it off. It's grown on me. In fact, I think it might be the most magnificent thing you've ever given me." Richard relaxed visibly, his shoulders dropping an inch. He took a sip of coffee, his confidence returning. "I told you," he said, offering a patronizing smile. "It's a statement piece. It suits you." I leaned in closer, dropping my voice to a conspiratorial whisper, playing the part of the materialistic socialite he believed me to be. "It suits the bank account, too. I sent a photo of it to my friend Sarah at the auction house last night, just out of curiosity." I paused for effect, watching him over the rim of my cup. "Richard," she said with the provenance and the jade quality, "this isn't $100,000 piece. She thinks it could appraise for over $500,000 in the current market." The reaction was instantaneous. The cup froze halfway to his mouth. I saw the calculation flash behind his eyes, the arithmetic of greed. He wasn't seeing his wife. He was seeing an extra $500,000 for his new life with Isabella. $500,000 could buy a lot of luxury in a non-extradition country. 500, he repeated, trying to sound casual but failing. "That sounds high." I shrugged, feigning innocence. "Sarah knows her stuff, but that got me thinking. We can't possibly travel with this, or even keep it in the house, without a rush insurance rider. If it got lost or stolen, say on a trip—" I let the sentence hang there, pregnant with implication. I saw the gears turning in his head. He was thinking about the Maldives. He was thinking about how easy it would be to report the bracelet stolen once we were abroad, or once he was abroad without me, and claim that massive payout. I had just offered him a golden parachute, and he was desperate enough to grab it. "You're right," he said, his voice taking on a sudden urgency. "We should absolutely insure it. Can you handle that today before the gala?" This was the moment. I set my cup down and pulled the folded document from my pocket. It was a single sheet of paper dense with legal jargon, looking for all the world like a standard insurance addendum. "Way ahead of you," I beamed. "I already called the broker. He said he can bind the policy effective immediately for the full $500,000, but because the value is so high and because of the audit scrutiny on the business right now, he needs to separate it from any corporate liability." I smoothed the paper out on the counter in front of him. "It's just a standard affidavit of personal ownership. It essentially declares that this bracelet is your sole personal property, purchased with your private funds, and has absolutely no connection to Apex Holdings or any company accounts. It protects the payout from being frozen if the company has tax issues." I held my breath. This was the gamble. If he read it carefully, if he remembered that he had actually used Apex Holdings as dirty money to buy it, he might hesitate. But I was banking on his arrogance. I was banking on the fact that he thought I was a financial novice who didn't know about Apex. And most of all, I was banking on the $500,000 blinding him to the fine print. Richard scanned the document quickly, his eyes glazing over the "whereas" and "herefore" clauses, stopping only to check the valuation figure I had typed in $500,000, $1,000 to dollars. He let out a short, dismissive laugh. "You and your paperwork, Kristen. You're always so cautious." He didn't ask about the source of funds clause. He didn't ask why I needed him to swear under penalty of perjury that the asset was his. He just saw the money. "Just sign here," I said, pointing to the line at the bottom, my finger steady, despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins like ice water. "And we're covered." Richard pulled a Montblanc pen from his jacket pocket, the same pen he probably used to sign the lease on his love nest with Isabella, and uncapped it with a flourish. The scratching sound of the nib against the paper sounded like a thunderclap in the quiet kitchen. He scrawled his signature bold and looping, sealing his fate with blue ink. By signing that affidavit, he had just formally claimed ownership of the laundered asset. He had just legally severed my connection to the crime and handcuffed himself to the felony. He handed the paper back to me with a wink. "There. Happy now you're worth $500,000. I took the document, folding it precisely along the crease, and tucked it back into my robe. I looked at him, realizing he had no idea that he had just signed his own arrest warrant. He thought he was signing an insurance policy. In reality, he just signed a confession to federal money laundering. The evening of the spring gala arrived with the suffocating weight of a storm about to break, though the sky outside our foyer windows was clear and star-studded. I stood before the full-length mirror in the entryway, smoothing the silk of my midnight blue gown, a dress Richard had selected because it matched the family colors, or rather, the corporate branding he was so desperate to project. He was pacing by the door, checking his watch every 30 seconds, his tuxedo crisp, his demeanor vibrating with that frantic, nervous energy I had come to recognize as the adrenaline of a man about to make his escape. The jade bracelet sat on my wrist, dark and heavy, a physical anchor to the crime he had orchestrated. I knew that in less than an hour, if I did nothing, this piece of jewelry would be the evidence that put me in handcuffs while he boarded a plane to the Maldives with a woman half my age. But I wasn't doing nothing. I was executing the final, most delicate step of a transaction I had been planning for 24 hours. "Come on, Kristen," Richard snapped, opening the front door to check for the limousine that was scheduled to take us to the ballroom. "The driver should be here any minute. We can't be late. Perception is everything tonight." I took a deep breath, steadying my hands, and then initiated the maneuver I had rehearsed in my head a dozen times. I let out a small, sharp gasp and grabbed my left wrist. "Richard, wait!" I cried out, injecting a note of genuine panic into my voice. I fumbled frantically with the bracelet, twisting my arm as if the jewelry were slipping. The clasp. It just popped open. I think the mechanism is faulty. I looked at him with wide, terrified eyes. "It feels loose, Richard. If I wear this, it's going to fall off in the driveway or at the table. We can't lose a $500,000 asset. The insurance policy won't cover it if I was negligent." The mention of the money, the inflated $500,000 valuation we had established that morning, acted exactly as I knew it would. Richard's impatience vanished, replaced instantly by the protective greed of a miser guarding his gold. He crossed the foyer in 2 strides, grabbing my wrist to inspect the faulty clasp I had deliberately unhooked moments before. "Take it off," he commanded, his eyes narrowing. "You're right. We can't risk it dropping on the pavement. I don't trust you to pay attention to it while you're socializing." I unhooked the jade circle and held it out to him, the heavy stone gleaming under the chandelier light. "You hold it," I said, pressing it into his palm. "Put it in your inner jacket pocket. It's safer with you until we get to the VIP entrance. You can put it back on me once we're inside the venue." Richard nodded, feeling the weight of the fortune in his hand. He slid the bracelet into the breast pocket of his tuxedo jacket right over his heart, patting the fabric to ensure it was secure. "Fine," he muttered, adjusting his lapels. "But don't make a scene about it when we get there. Just let me handle it." He opened the heavy oak door and swept his arm out, expecting to see the sleek black stretch limo that would carry him to his freedom. Instead, the driveway was flooded with the harsh, strobing red and blue lights of 3 unmarked sedans blocking the exit. 4 men in dark suits were already walking up the front steps, their badges flashing in the porch light, their faces grim and purposeful. These weren't local police, they were federal agents. I had forwarded the Apex Holdings ledger, the wire transfer receipts, and the digital purchase order for the bracelet to the FBI's Financial Crimes Division exactly 6 hours ago using an encrypted whistleblower portal. I watched the color drain from Richard's face, turning his complexion the color of old ash. He froze, his hand instinctively going to his chest, covering the pocket where the bracelet lay hidden. "Richard Vance," the lead agent barked, stopping at the threshold. "We have a federal warrant for your arrest regarding wire fraud and money laundering connected to Apex Holdings." Richard stumbled back, his arrogance crumbling into a pathetic stammer. There must be a mistake. I'm a consultant. I don't know anything about Apex Holdings." The agent stepped closer, his voice cutting through the night air like a knife. "We have the wire transfers, Mr. Vance. And we know you are in possession of a specific asset, a jade bracelet purchased with laundered funds 3 days ago." Richard's eyes darted wildly from the agents to me. Panic overtook him, and he did exactly what I knew he would do. He tried to sacrifice me. "That's not mine," he shouted, pointing a shaking finger at me. "That's my wife's jewelry. She bought it. She's the one who manages the household accounts. If there's illegal money, she's the one who moved it. Talk to her." He reached into his pocket and pulled out the jade bracelet, thrusting it toward the agent, as if it were a grenade he could throw back at me. "See? It's hers. I was just holding it." The betrayal was total, absolute, and publicly humiliating. But the lead agent didn't look at me. He didn't even blink. He reached into his file folder and pulled out a single sheet of paper, a digital copy of the document Richard had signed over coffee and croissants only 12 hours earlier. "That's interesting, Mr. Vance," the agent said, his voice dripping with professional disdain. "Because at 8:00 a.m. this morning, your wife's insurance broker submitted this affidavit of personal ownership to the underwriting database, which was flagged by our system. In this sworn document signed by you, you claim under penalty of perjury that this item is your sole personal property, purchased with your private funds, and has no connection to any corporate entity." The agent held the paper up. Richard's signature stared back at him, bold and undeniable. "You claimed it to get an insurance policy, sir, which means you either committed insurance fraud or you just confessed to owning the laundered asset. Either way, you're coming with us." Richard froze, the bracelet dangling limply from his hand like a dead snake. The reality of the trap crashed down on him. He looked at the document, then at the agents, and finally he turned to look at me. He was searching for the submissive, clueless wife who would jump in front of the bullet for him. He was waiting for me to scream, to cry, to tell them it was all a misunderstanding. Instead, I stood perfectly still, my bare wrists crossing casually in front of my blue gown, my face composed and serene. He looked at me, waiting for me to save him, to lie, to take the blame like a good wife. I just smiled and said, "I followed your instructions, Richard. I let you handle everything." The silence that followed the departure of the federal agents was heavy, absolute, and utterly peaceful. I stood in the driveway of the mansion Richard had built to intimidate the world, watching the red taillights fade into the darkness, carrying away the man who had tried to sell my future for a plane ticket to the Maldives. The aftermath wasn't the chaotic media circus Richard would have feared most. It was a methodical, bureaucratic dismantling of his life, executed with the same cold precision he had applied to our marriage. Because I had cooperated fully, providing the encrypted ledgers, the flight manifests, and the damning timeline of the jade bracelet purchase, the district attorney viewed me not as an accomplice, but as a whistleblower. I retained my immunity, my freedom, and more importantly, my dignity. Richard, on the other hand, watched his world disintegrate from behind a pane of reinforced glass. His bail hearing was a masterclass in humiliation. His high-priced lawyers argued that he was a pillar of the community, a man with deep roots who would never flee. That argument collapsed the moment the prosecutor presented the 2 one-way first-class tickets to Malé that I had extracted from his deleted email trash bin. The judge took one look at the itinerary scheduled for the morning after the gala and declared him an immediate flight risk. Bail was denied. The look on Richard's face when the gavel banged down wasn't anger. It was the hollow, terrifying realization that he was no longer in control. And then there was Isabella. The young, vibrant heiress he had risked everything for didn't stand by her man. When the FBI brought her in for questioning regarding her knowledge of the flight plans, she didn't protect him. She didn't have the stomach for federal prison. She turned on him with a speed that was almost impressive, trading her testimony for leniency. She painted herself as a naive victim of an older predator, handing over texts and emails that painted Richard as the sole architect of the scheme. The divorce that followed was swift and uncontested. With Richard facing a 15-year sentence for money laundering and wire fraud, he had no leverage left to fight me. I walked away with exactly what was legally mine, my half of the clean marital assets, my pension, and my name, untarnished by his crimes. 3 weeks after the sentencing, on a Tuesday afternoon, bathed in the soft golden light of early autumn, I drove back to the Golden Oaks. I wasn't hiding a heavy jade shackle under my sleeve this time. I walked into the facility with my head held high, the click of my heels on the tile floor sounding like a rhythm of independence. I found Evelyn in the private garden sitting on a wrought iron bench beneath a Japanese maple tree. She wasn't playing the part of the senile old woman anymore. She was sitting upright reading a newspaper, looking every bit the matriarch she had been before her son tried to erase her. I didn't say a word as I approached. I simply sat down beside her, the silence between us comfortable and filled with a mutual, unspoken understanding. I reached into my purse and pulled out a small, flat jewelry box. It wasn't velvet, it was simple cardstock. I opened it to reveal a thin, elegant bangle made of 14-karat gold. It wasn't an antique. It wasn't a marker. It was just a piece of jewelry I had bought that morning with my own honest money from my own personal account. I held it out to her. "For the new chapter," I said softly. Evelyn looked at the gold, then up at me, her eyes glistening with a clarity that stung. She reached out her fingers, trembling slightly, and allowed me to slip the bangle over her wrist. It was light, unburdened by secrets or crimes. She touched the cool metal, tracing the simple curve of it. Then she smiled, not the sharp, cynical smirk of a survivor, but the genuine, soft smile of a woman who finally felt safe. We sat there for a long time watching the leaves fall, acknowledging that the cycle of abuse that had plagued the Vance family for generations had finally stopped with us. That evening, I stood on the balcony of my new apartment. It was a fraction of the size of the mansion. The kitchen had laminate countertops instead of granite, and the view was of the city skyline rather than a manicured estate. But it was mine. I poured a glass of white wine and leaned against the railing, feeling the cool night air on my skin. I looked down at my wrists. They were bare. No jade, no diamonds, no heavy cuffs disguised as gifts. They felt incredibly light. I took a sip of wine, the taste crisp and clean, and reflected on the journey that had brought me here. Richard had mistaken my silence for weakness and my patience for stupidity. He thought he could construct a cage out of luxury and lock me inside it while he threw away the key. But he forgot that I knew how to pick locks. I didn't need to scream or fight or burn the house down to win. I just needed to understand the rules better than he did. I realized then that the greatest gift I gave myself wasn't the revenge or the money or the satisfaction of seeing him fall. It was the quiet, terrifyingly beautiful realization that I was finally the author of my own life. Some traps are made of steel, others are made of gold. The trick isn't to break them, it's to make sure you're not the one inside when they close. Thank you for joining me on Kristen's journey from betrayal to absolute freedom. Her story reminds us that sometimes silence is the loudest weapon we possess, and that a woman's intuition is a data point that should never be ignored. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments section below. Do you think Richard got what he deserved, or was his punishment too harsh? Have you ever received a gift that felt more like a burden than a blessing, or had a gut feeling about a situation that turned out to be exactly right? Your wisdom and experiences make this community special, so please share your perspective with us. If you enjoyed this story of justice and resilience and want to hear more narratives about women finding their strength against the odds, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring more of these powerful stories to life. Until next time, trust your instincts and remember to always check the fine print.